Welcome to the ESI Africa Studio, African Utility Week. I'm Rose Bundock and I'm joined now by Ashley Maistry, Senior Manager of Smart Grid Services at Accenture. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
I believe Accenture has just completed a digital enabled grid survey.
Yes.
Could you give us a little sneak peek
So
into
it's
the
an annual
results?
survey that we run. It's a global survey. We've got input from many countries around the world, including South Africa this year. We hope to include other countries in Africa going forward. And I think one of the key things, the findings that came out of this year's survey, which is the top of the CIO forum, if you can call it, is the evolving grid and how the distribution business or the distribution divisions within most of these utilities are having to compete now with their customers for revenue. Quite interesting spin on things, but effectively it's what's happening is that more and more consumers, utility customers, are deciding to go down the route of providing their own energy for whatever reason. It might be incentives from the government, regulatory, as well as reliability of the network supply, and price and cost. So they're looking to evolve, and the utility therefore needs to evolve in order to capture the market, to retain their share of the wallet and compete. Yeah.
What was the picture like coming out of Africa? What were the findings there?
So like I said, it was limited to South Africa. But what we found was that in South Africa, the correlation between Europe and Africa was very similar. So South Africa is very similar. So from the point of view that in South Africa, with our problems around supply and generation capacity constraints, we found that customers who obviously can afford it were looking to go off-grid, but not totally off-grid, so i.e. small microgrids as well as photovoltaics. And as a result of this, their consumption during the time when baseload was available from the generation capacity was not being consumed. So you're getting a slightly excess supply during a baseload period. However, during peak period, which is the evenings and the mornings, when they're not able to get their renewable energy source working for them, then the utility is struggling. So it's an interesting model. So utilities need to evolve to be able to understand how they can now participate and compete at the same time in that space.
Is the mechanisms in place for that smooth exchange
and that's where the problem
user
exists.
and prosumer?
And that's where the problem exists. So a lot of the focus has been on generation, and now with this impact on the utility needs to enhance their integration into, first of all, accepting feed-in from customers, taking into account. And I know it's an interesting topic is weather patterns and how that affects renewables. So you need to understand how that and model that into their grid. They also need to look at what can I do beyond the meter to capture that market. So before utilities were kind of, I'll stop at the meter, it's a safe space, I know how to manage it, but now they need to actually get into the home. So the layer that they need to put in at the bottom is the smart meter, enables them to measure electricity both bidirectional as well as give them insight into consumption. Beyond that, they need to go and say, well, what can I do to help the customer? Maybe I need to invest in a Tesla wall battery and fund the customer and use the meter to measure that consumption, the smart meter. Hence it's serving multiple purposes now. And therefore, when we have the period where the customer is not able to get from the existing renewable, fund it through the battery model, because I'm not getting the base load pushed up and changing throughout the day, because my base load is fixed. So the spikes in the base load will come from the battery, which solves my problem and also gives me the revenue as well.
So you see the smart meter as very central to the whole.
It is the bottom layer, but it's also the layer that supports everything else.
Yeah. So penetration is obviously increasing in South Africa of smart meters, but are utilities using them in a truly smart way?
No, and this is a focus area of my topic later today at Africa Utility Week, because I believe that we've done research and it shows that there are tons of data that's coming from the meter that the utility is not using. A typical example is if you have 100,000 meters out there recording electricity consumption at 15 half-hour intervals, you're talking about 200,000 interval points per hour, right? 24 hours a day, right? You can see that's 240,000 points of data daily that's coming back. On top of that, there's all the events and alarms and over voltage supply, bidirectional flows, etc. That's also coming through. The utility is being flooded with that data, and they're not getting value from that data. So what we're saying is that there's three large groups there. There's customer data or customer impactful data, there's grid operations data, and then there's revenue related data the utilities need to manage. And by using the right analytics tools and implementing the way that is the right model of operation, they can start taking that data and slowly building the value that comes out of it, so they can start targeting savings in operations, outage management and restoration improvements, increase in revenue by operating new tariffs and models, and then the third element around the customer themselves, they're able to understand how their consumption is, and therefore demand response programs can be improved. And you get profile information. I mean, if you know what you're doing, automatically if you look at your consumption, you just by knowing what your consumption is, and over a periodic way, it just makes you think about it. And we've seen that, for example, in California, 5% energy efficiency just by giving people insight into their consumption. And that makes a big difference.
Are utilities trusting the cloud? Are more and more moving up to cloud-based data services?
So in Europe, yes.
Yeah.
In the US, yes, they are as well. Asia Pacific, they're getting on board slowly. I think there's a lot of regulation that's not in place to support it.
Yeah.
And in Africa and South Africa, I think the biggest thing is there's this concept that somebody mentioned to me yesterday. It's called local. So we need a local installation of a cloud. We can't have that cloud sitting in Europe and working for us in that way. The cloud needs to be in Africa. It needs to be hosted locally. It needs to show that in South Africa or in African countries, for example, that we're creating opportunities for local companies to build and develop and grow their technologies. So definitely, yes, cloud is the way for us to manage the large sets of data that's coming through, but in a local context.
Is there that capacity right now in South Africa to be local?
There is. If you look at some of the big telcos, for example, Vodacoms and the MTNs of the world, through Vodafone, etc., they've built these huge data centers in South Africa, massive data centers that are underutilized right now, heavily underutilized. But there's large marketing campaigns to get businesses on board, and we can tap into that without having to go far away.
Yeah.
So we should be looking at it definitely.
I get the feeling most participants at this conference, maybe utilities in general, are sold on the idea of smart meters and the two-way communication and all the different functions as you've described. But I guess it comes down to cost.
Yes.
How can you fund a major rollout?
Yeah, and that's been the challenge for utilities in the last few years. Some of the larger utilities, maybe they've built up funds and they're able to support that through some of their reserves. But in the main, it's very costly. And the benefits are there. I mean, we've put together a business case that says the benefits are there. However, the capital investment is not available. The focus has been on, can I get more electrification in? Can I get new customers on the network? Because that's where the countries are needing to focus their energy. So by switching the model into, can you as a consortium of vendors offering services across the different spectrums, i.e. the smart meter, the telecommunications, the customer interaction that needs to happen around it, the installation of these devices, and the technology and back-end systems that need to support it, and on top of that, running the operations. Because as you can imagine, there is a large focus on skills development, but we're not there yet. In order to get there, we need to have these self-funding models where consortiums come together, put in their money on the table, offer to install it, set it up, build it, and run it as a service for the utility, where the utility can pay them through an OPEX model, where it's a win-win for everybody. I.e., it's almost becoming a public-private type partnership that's happening, but the market's evolving. Some companies are going for it, and they've started these processes.
Okay.
Some of them have hit certain potholes along the way, if I can say, and they're learning, and the market is growing, and everybody's learning as well. So yes, it is something that's happening. It needs to happen, and why not get somebody else to pay for it if you're a utility? And when you get the benefits of it, you pay out of your benefits. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Are there any case studies, examples of that in actual practice?
So if you look at it in South Africa, I don't mention any names or anything, but there was a large utility, municipality, metropolitan that went down this route, and there were learnings that they got from their first iteration of this, and they've incorporated that within their next model, as well as some of the smaller ones. As you can imagine, the concept of a meter data management system is this mammoth of a system that it costs an arm and a leg to implement, right? And smaller utilities who are running 70,000 customers can't really go out and buy that. But here's where the cloud solution comes in. You set it up as a multi-tenant cloud solution. Everybody subscribes to a service rather than you buying the system and plotting it on your land, on your premise. And as a result, they can now participate. But then that's what allows the private companies to participate, because before they couldn't give you all the kit and charge you a huge fixed cost for a marginal variable cost that's an increase. Now they can say, actually, we can build this cost up with you as we go with the cloud version. So it's a win-win. It's the new way of working.
We were speaking a bit before we started about water meters as well, and sort of trying to, in the planning stage, think, okay, well, I'm doing this electricity meter rollout, why not? If I'm a municipality that offers both water and power, why not do it at the same time?
Absolutely.
I mean, is that something that...
Absolutely. I mean, the synergies and savings you can get from putting in a telecoms infrastructure that can support both electricity and water are significant. And as you can imagine, the back-end systems are very similar supporting these. So there's a bit of a generic setups that exists to support this, and then obviously there's uniqueness around some of it. And finding that balance can work, and therefore the model for electricity, the model for water is not as simple as the model for electricity.
Right.
The revenues from water are far lower than the revenues from electricity. So you can imagine the cost implications of implementing smart meters are even more complex, and the shelf life, i.e. the typical life of a smart meter for water, because of the capability maybe of being able to open and close a valve, i.e. electromechanical connection for water, over time can deteriorate, and as a result, the payback period needs to be in line with the replacement cycle. Right now, it's hard to get that balance. So by putting electricity and water and using synergies across the two in terms of communications, in terms of targeting customers, you don't have to do 2 visits to the customer, etc. All of that improves the business case and makes it more viable.
And would that fit into the model you were talking about, the kind of software as a service?
Absolutely. The both can be applied next to each other in parallel to get it. I've put together a business case that says to us that yes, and we do this for a large metropolitan city in South Africa, that said the business case is viable on a self-funded model. Yeah.
And just to wrap up, what's Accenture feeling about this year? Positive?
Very positive, very excited. We think that the market is moving in the direction where they realize the value from some of these smart grid technologies, and they're seeing it not just as technology anymore as well. They're seeing it as, what am I acquiring as a business, from a business perspective? What is the value? What is the return on investment that I'm looking for? What is the business case that's driving this? And I want to buy the business outcome, not the technology.
Okay.
That way, they abstract themselves from that. They shift that risk to somebody else, and they reap the benefits. It's a win-win.
Great.
And Accenture is highly focused on that space.
Thank you, Ashley, for your comments. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.